Blood soaked through the mud before Elias Boone even saw the girl attached to the trap. The steel jaws clamped around her ankle, while she clawed through wet dirt with both hands, dragging herself inch by inch toward the river gorge. Her breathing sounded animal, sharp, fast, mean. Elias stepped closer with the rifle hanging low against his arm. "Hold still." She twisted hard and spit directly at his boots. "I ain't gonna hurt you." Her fingers grabbed a rock. He raised the rifle slightly. "You hit me. You bleed worse." She froze then, not because of him, because something moved behind him in the trees. The wolf stood half-hidden between dark trunks, pale eyes fixed on the girl. Elias had seen the animal twice before near his trap line. Always silent, always watching. The girl stared at it like she recognized it from somewhere terrible. "Easy," Elias said softly. The wolf disappeared into the woods without sound. The girl started pulling again. The trap tore deeper into her ankle. Blood spread wider beneath her leg. "Stop fighting it." She bared her teeth at him. "You want the bone cracked too?" No answer came, not even a sound. Her hair hung across her face in dirty knots. Bruises darkened her throat. One sleeve had been ripped clean off, exposing old cuts along her shoulder and arm. Elias crouched carefully beside the trap. "I gotta open it." The girl jerked away. "I know." He pressed both hands against the steel jaws and forced them apart. The second the pressure loosened, the girl tried crawling again. Pain folded her in half before she made it 2 feet. "Damn it!" Elias grabbed her wrist. She bit him instantly, hard enough to draw blood. He cursed and shoved her back into the mud. "You little animal!" Her eyes stayed wild, empty 1 second, furious the next. Far below the ridge came the faint sound of horses. Elias turned his head toward the valley. Riders moved through the lower trees carrying lanterns despite the fading daylight. Too many riders for ranch hands. They spread apart carefully like men searching for something they expected to run, or someone. The girl saw them too. Panic flashed across her face so fast it barely looked human. "You know them?" "Nothing." "You running from law?" Her breathing quickened. Elias looked back down the mountain. The riders kept moving in slow patterns, not wandering, hunting. He slid the rifle onto his shoulder and lifted the girl carefully into his arms. She fought immediately, scratching at his coat. "Quit it!" She slammed her elbow into his chest. "You want to stay here and die?" That finally stopped her. He carried her uphill through narrow pine trails toward the cabin hidden along the upper ridge. The whole way she kept staring behind them, watching the valley, watching the riders. Once Elias caught her whispering something under her breath, but the words disappeared into the wind before he heard them clearly. By the time they reached the cabin, darkness had swallowed the mountain. Elias kicked the door open. "Sit." The girl remained rigid in his arms. "I ain't dropping you." He lowered her carefully beside the stove. She instantly dragged herself backward across the floorboards until her shoulders hit the wall. Elias grabbed whiskey and cloth from the shelf. "I need to clean it." She shook her head violently. "You'll lose the foot." She reached for the fireplace poker instead. "Fine," he muttered. "Bleed stubborn." He cleaned his own bitten hand first while watching her from across the room. The girl never looked away from him once. Not while he worked. Not while he fed wood into the stove. Not while he placed stew beside her chair. "You hungry?" "Nothing. Suit yourself." Hours passed quietly except for the crackling fire. Eventually, the smell of food pulled her closer. She snatched the bowl fast and ate with both hands like somebody expecting it stolen away. Elias sat near the window sharpening a knife. "You got a name?" Silence. "You always this friendly?" She ignored him. At some point, her eyes drifted toward the old dresser near Elias's bed. One drawer sat slightly open. Inside rested a tarnished sheriff badge beside folded letters tied with string. The girl stared at the badge too long. Elias noticed. That belonged to another life. Her eyes narrowed. "I ain't law anymore." Still she stared. "You scared of badges?" For the first time she reacted before hiding it. Her shoulders tightened. Her fingers dug into the bowl. Elias leaned back slowly. "Whoever's after you wears one." No answer came. Outside, the wind carried faint sounds from the valley again. Dogs barking. Men shouting somewhere far below the ridge. The girl heard it too. She set the bowl down carefully and backed farther into the corner near the wall. "Nobody's climbing up here tonight," Elias said. He did not fully believe it himself. Near midnight, Elias woke suddenly to screaming. The girl thrashed across the floor beside the stove, trapped inside some nightmare she could not escape. Tears streaked down her face while her hands clawed wildly at invisible things. "Hey!" she screamed louder. "Wake up!" Elias grabbed her shoulders. Her eyes snapped open, and she struck him across the mouth before scrambling away breathless. "It's over," he said. She pressed herself against the wall, shaking violently. Then both of them noticed the orange glow outside. Elias stepped toward the window. Far below the mountain ridge, a single fire burned bright against the darkness. Then another appeared farther east. Signal fires. The riders were talking to each other, meeching. Elias looked back at the terrified girl crouched beside his stove. Bruised throat, burned skin, fear too deep to fake. The mountain had brought him trouble wearing human skin. Elias kept watching the fires below the ridge while the girl sat curled against the wall, hugging her knees tightly against her chest. The whole cabin felt smaller suddenly, like the mountain itself had leaned closer around them. He checked the rifle beside the door, then moved to shutter the windows. "You got people coming for you," he said quietly. The girl lowered her eyes. "They family?" "Nothing." "Men from the law?" Still nothing. He studied her face again beneath the dirt and bruises. She looked young. Too young for scars like those. Too young for fear that deep outside. One final fire appeared near the river crossing. Elias exhaled slowly. Whoever was hunting her already knew the mountain. Somewhere deeper in the trees, the wolf howled once. The girl flinched hard at the sound. Elias closed the window shutters and knew trouble had reached his cabin long before sunrise ever would. 3 fires burned below the ridge while Elias Boone stood outside gripping the rifle tightly against his chest. The flames glowed through the darkness in a straight line across the valley floor. Search markers. Organized. Deliberate. Somebody was sweeping the mountain slowly. The girl stood barefoot in the cabin doorway behind him. Her injured ankle was wrapped in fresh cloth. Dirt still streaked her face. "You know them." Silence. "You running from law?" "Nothing." "You kill somebody?" Her face twitched slightly. Not fear, recognition. Elias looked back toward the fires. "That bad?" The girl folded her arms around herself and stared toward the valley without blinking. Wind pushed through the trees around the cabin. Somewhere deeper in the woods, the wolf howled again. "You got people scared of you or scared for you?" No answer came. Elias shut the cabin door hard and dropped the wooden bar into place. "Fine. Stay mute." The girl remained awake most of the night beside the stove. Every small sound outside made her tense. Once Elias caught her holding the kitchen knife while staring toward the windows. "You planning on stabbing me in my sleep?" Her eyes narrowed. "You bite first. Maybe stabbing comes second." Still nothing. Morning arrived gray and cold. Elias saddled the horse while the girl watched from the loft above the cabin. He handed her a tin cup filled with water. "I need medicine." She said nothing. "You stay hidden, silence. If riders come, don't move." He pointed toward the rifle above the fireplace. "And don't touch that." The girl looked directly at the weapon. Elias sighed. "That means you're gonna touch it." He rode down the mountain trail slowly with his coat collar raised high against the wind. The closer he reached town, the quieter everything felt. Wagons sat still outside the feed store. Men standing near the barber shop stopped talking when they saw him. 2 women gathering water hurried away without looking up. Wrong. The whole place felt wrong. Elias tied his horse outside the general store and stepped toward the entrance. Sheriff Vance blocked the doorway before he could enter fully. "You living alone up there still?" "Mostly." Vance studied him carefully. "Heard somebody's stealing horses. I trap wolves, not thieves." "Funny. You stopping me from buying coffee now?" Vance lowered his voice. "Governor Bell's offering money. For what? For a girl. The room behind Vance went silent instantly. Even the old man near the stove stopped chewing. Ilias shrugged lightly. Town's full of girls, not this one. Vance glanced toward the others before speaking again. Young, thin, dark hair, violent how? Bites. A few nervous laughs passed through the room. Vance continued. Belle says she escaped from the reform house. Reform house. She's unstable, according to Belle. According to everybody, Ilias stepped inside finally. And what's Belle paying? Enough. For bringing her back alive? Vance hesitated. That ain't specified. The preacher stood near the canned goods, pretending not to listen. Sweat covered his forehead despite the cold. Ilias noticed bruises wrapped around the preacher's daughter's wrist as she stocked shelves nearby. Small bruises, Finfer-shaped, the girl kept her eyes lowered. Ilias looked back toward Vance. This reform house helped many people? Vance stared at him coldly. Careful. I asked a question. You asking too many lately. The preacher suddenly interrupted. Governor Bell does the Lord's work. Ilias turned toward him. Then, why you shaking? The preacher swallowed hard but said nothing else. Vance stepped closer. Belle wants her returned before winter. And if she don't want to return, that don't matter. Ilias bought bandages, whiskey, and dried meat without another word. The entire store watched him leave. Outside, Deputy Harrow leaned against the hitching post, smoking slowly. You hear the reward? Heard. You find her, you tell us. Why would I? Because Belle owns half this valley. Ilias mounted the horse. Only half? Harrow smiled without humor. Other half scared of him. The ride back up the mountain felt longer. Snow clouds gathered over the ridge while crows circled above the lower trees. Elias kept replaying the town in his head. The silence, the bruises, the way people spoke Belle's name carefully, like church prayer. By dusk, he reached the cabin. The front door stood slightly open. Ilias grabbed the rifle instantly and stepped inside quietly. The girl sat beside the stove, holding an old photograph in both hands. His wife. The picture had been hidden inside the dresser drawer beneath the sheriff badge. You went through my things. The girl looked down at the photograph again. You can read silence. You understand every word I say, don't you? Slowly, carefully, she nodded. Ilias felt something heavy settle in his stomach. All this time. The girl pointed toward the valley below the mountain, toward Belle's land. Fear crossed her face harder than before. For the first time in years, Elias Boone felt afraid of who truly owned the mountain beneath him. Elias took the photograph gently from her hands and studied the faded image. His wife stood beside the old cabin porch, smiling at something outside the frame. Dead 6 winters now. Fever took her fast. Silence stayed afterward. You read her name, he asked. The girl nodded once. What is it? She opened her mouth slightly, then stopped. No sound came. You forgot how? Her eyes lowered. Or somebody teach you not to? The fire cracked loudly between them. Ilias poured whiskey into a tin cup and sat heavily near the stove. Belle never owned this mountain before the war. Men used to settle problems themselves. The girl watched him carefully. Then politicians came. Outside, horses moved somewhere far below the ridge again. Ilias stood immediately and blew out the lantern near the window. Loft, he whispered. The girl grabbed the photograph accidentally while scrambling upward. Leave that. She froze, then carefully placed it back onto the table. Voices drifted faintly through the trees outside. Men. Dogs, too. Elias cocked the rifle slowly. The girl crouched above the cabin beams, staring down through the cracks in the ceiling, like a trapped animal waiting for hunters to pass beneath it. Neither of them spoke again while the voices climbed slowly higher through the dark mountain trees. Ilias moved beside the door and listened carefully as the barking drifted closer, then farther away again. The girl remained perfectly still above him. She already knew exactly how hunted things survived long winters inside mountains like these. The knocking comes hard and fast, like fists trying to break bone instead of wood. Elias freezes mid-step, breath caught halfway in his chest. The girl does not hesitate. She drops low, scrambling across the floor, fingers clawing at the loose boards near the stove. He watches her vanish beneath them, the wood falling back into place just as the knocking comes again, louder now. Open up. Elias moves slow, each step measured. His hand brushes the rifle leaning by the door but does not take it. Not yet. He pulls the door open just enough to see the man outside. Deputy Harrow stands there, smiling without warmth. "Morning," Harrow says. "It ain't." Elias replies. Harrow's eyes flick past him, already searching the cabin. "Mind if we look around?" "I do." "Governor's orders. Governor ain't king up here." Harrow's smile tightens. Funny thing about orders. They travel farther than kings. Behind him, 3 men wait in the snow. Each holds a leash, the dogs strain forward, low whining sounds slipping from their throats. Their eyes fix on the cabin like they smell something buried deep. Elias steps outside, pulling the door behind him. "You got business, say it." "Stolen livestock," Harrow says. "Came this way. Ain't seen any. You live alone?" "Yes." "You sure about that?" Elias stares at him. "You calling me a liar? I'm asking questions." "You asked," I answered. Harrow glances past him again, then nods toward the door. "We'll take a look." "No." The word hangs there, sharp. Harrow tilts his head. "You hurt?" Elias doesn't blink. "No, you sure?" I said no. Harrow points toward the window. "Bandages hanging by your stove, fresh ones." Elias shrugs. "Cut my hand. Let me see it." "No." The dogs start whining louder now, pulling against the leashes. One of them barks, sudden and sharp, then digs its paws into the snow like it wants to bolt forward. "What's got them worked up?" Elias asks. "They smell something," one of the men says. "They always do," another mutters. Harrow steps closer, lowering his voice. "You hiding something in there, Elias?" Elias moves his hand just enough that it rests near the rifle behind the door. "You searching my house or starting a war?" Harrow grins, slow and thin. "Depends what's inside." For a moment, no one moves. The wind cuts across the clearing, sharp as a blade. Snow shifts along the roof above them, a low-grown building. "You don't want trouble," Harrow says. "I don't want you in my house." Same thing sometimes. The dog nearest the door suddenly yelps, jerking back hard. The others follow, panic rising in them all at once. A deep rumble rolls from above as snow begins sliding from the roof in a heavy sheet. It crashes down beside them like distant thunder. The dogs go wild. One breaks free, bolting into the trees. Another drops flat, refusing to move. The third whines and claws backward, choking against its leash. "What the hell?" one of the men shouts. "Get them under control," Harrow snaps. "They won't listen," Elias says quietly. Harrow looks at him again, longer this time. Something shifts behind his eyes, calculation mixing with doubt. "We'll be back," Harrow says. "Don't," Elias replies. Harrow ignores him. "If you're lying, you won't get a second warning." "I won't need one." Harrow turns, gesturing to his men. They drag the dogs away, the animals still fighting, still whining toward the cabin as if something inside calls to them. Elias watches until they disappear into the trees. The silence that follows feels wrong, too thick, like the mountain itself is holding its breath. He waits, then he moves. Inside, the cabin feels colder. He crosses the room and drops to his knees by the loose boards. His fingers hesitate for just a second before prying them up. "Come out," he says. Nothing. "It's me." A pause, then movement. The girl crawls out slowly, her body shaking so hard it looks like she might break apart. Her eyes are wide, unfocused, still trapped somewhere beneath the floor. "They're gone," Elias says. She doesn't respond. "They ain't coming back today." Still nothing. He reaches out, then stops himself before touching her. "You hear me?" She nods once, barely. Her breathing is ragged. She pulls her arms tight round herself, rocking slightly. Elias notices it then, the way her shirt hangs wrong across her back. "Turn around," he says. She freezes. "I need to see if you're hurt." She shakes her head fast. "Turn around." "No." Her voice is barely there, a broken whisper. Elias frowns. "You said you couldn't talk." She clamps her mouth shut, eyes darting. "Turn around," he repeats, softer now, slowly, like every movement costs her something. She turns. He lifts the edge of her shirt, and goes still. The scars are burned deep into her skin. Not cuts, not accidents, letters. Clear, deliberate, carved and healed over into something permanent. Ownership marks. Elias steps back like he's been struck. "You were in Belle's house," he says. She doesn't answer. "You were his." Her eyes lock onto his. For a second, neither of them moves. Then she grabs a piece of charcoal from near the stove. Her hand trembles as she presses it to the table, dragging it hard across the wood. One word, "Darn't." Elias stares at it. "From who?" he asks. She shakes her head, frantic now. "Belle?" Her silence is answer enough. "They'll come back," Elias says. She nods. "They'll bring more men." Another nod. Elias looks toward the door. Then back at the word on the table. "I don't run." She slams the charcoal down again, harder this time, underlining the word until it almost breaks through the wood. "I said I don't run." Her hands grab his shirt, pulling him close with sudden strength. "Run," she whispers again. The room feels smaller now, the walls closer, the air heavier. Elias gently pulls her hands away. "We'll figure something else." She shakes her head, backing away from him like he's already made the wrong choice. Night falls fast. The cold deepens, creeping through the cracks in the cabin. Elias sits by the fire, rifle across his lap, eyes fixed on the door. The girl sleeps in short, broken stretches, never fully at rest. Outside, the mountain is quiet, too quiet. Then it starts, a voice, soft at first. "Barely there." Elias stiffens. "Elias." He looks up sharply. Nothing. The fire cracks. "Elias." The voice comes again, clearer now. Familiar, impossible. He stands slowly, moving toward the door. "Who's there?" he calls. No answer. He opens the door. The night stretches out before him, empty and still. Snow glows faint under the weak moonlight. No tracks, no figures, nothing. Elias. This time it comes from behind him. He turns fast. The cabin is empty. The girl is still asleep. The voice lingers in the air, soft and broken. His wife's voice. He grips the rifle tighter. "You're dead," he says. Silence answers him, then a whisper closer than before. "You left me." Elias's jaw tightens. "That ain't real." The fire flickers, shadows stretching along the walls like reaching hands. "You left me. Stop. You left me to die. Stop." The word echoes louder than he expects. The girl wakes with a start, eyes wide. "Did you hear that?" Elias asks. She nods slowly. Another voice joins the first. Then another. Low murmurs rising from outside, from the walls, from beneath the floor, not words, just presence. The mountain no longer feels empty. It feels awake, watching, waiting. Elias backs toward the center of the room, turning in a slow circle, rifle raised. "There's nobody here," he says, more to himself than anyone else. The whispers grow louder, not outside. Inside, the girl presses herself into the corner, hands over her ears. Elias stands frozen, caught between the door and the fire, between running and staying, between past and present. The word on the table stares back at him. But his feet don't move, not yet. Elias Boone sat alone at the cabin table, staring at the word "run" carved deep into the wood. Morning light pushed weakly through the windows, while the fire cracked softly behind him. The letters looked desperate, jagged, like the knife had nearly broken cutting them there. Behind him, the girl shifted suddenly in her sleep. Elias turned. She lay beside the fire, gripping a hunting knife tightly against her chest. Her face twisted hard beneath closed eyes. Sweat covered her forehead despite the cold inside the cabin. "You dreaming again?" Her fingers tightened harder around the knife. Elias stood slowly. "Easy." Her eyes snapped open instantly, wild again. The knife lifted halfway toward him before she fully recognized where she was. "Easy," he repeated. The girl lowered the blade slowly but kept staring at him. "You got a name?" "Nothing." "You remember home?" Her breathing sharpened immediately. "Family?" The knife slammed hard into the floorboards beside her leg. Elias flinched. The girl stared past him toward the eastern ridge outside the cabin window. Then she pointed. "What's out there?" "Silence." "You want me to follow you?" She pointed again, harder. By noon, Elias had the horses saddled. Fog rolled heavy through the mountain trails, while the girl rode ahead of him silently. Her injured ankle still dragged slightly against the stirrup, but she ignored the pain completely. "You been there before?" Elias asked. "Nothing. You leading me somewhere stupid?" The girl kept riding. The farther east they traveled, the stranger the woods became. Trees grew thicker, older. Cloth strips hung from low branches like forgotten markers. Once Elias noticed tiny bones tied together with strings swinging gently beside the trail. "You see that?" The girl refused to look at them. An hour later, the chapel appeared through the fog-lod roof, broken windows. Half buried beneath pine shadows, children's shoes hung from tree branches all around it. Dozens of them, small leather shoes rotting slowly in the cold air. Elias stopped his horse. "Jesus!" The girl froze instantly. Every bit of strength left her face at once. "You know this place." She climbed down carefully from the horse but refused to move closer. Her breathing turned shallow again. "You came here before?" "Nothing." Elias stepped toward the chapel slowly, while the girl stayed near the trees watching him with terrified eyes. The front doors hung crooked on broken hinges. Inside smelled like wet dirt and old smoke. Dust covered the warped wooden pews. Animal tracks crossed the floor. Then Elias noticed the chains. Rust covered them heavily now, but they still hung bolted against the far wall near the altar. What the hell? Women's dresses lay piled near the corner beneath mold and dirt. Tiny shoes too. Blankets. Torn ribbons. Elias moved deeper inside carefully. Behind the pulpit he found small graves pressed into the earth floor, no names. Only rough wooden markers, 5 of them, maybe more beneath the dirt. The air inside the chapel felt wrong. Thick somehow, like the room remembered things. Then Elias saw the iron cover beneath the pulpit, a sealed well. Heavy chains wrapped around it tightly. He crouched beside it carefully. Fresh scratches marked the rusted lid, recent scratches, not old. A floorboard creaked behind him. Elias grabbed the rifle instantly and turned. Sheriff Vance stood near the doorway, removing his gloves slowly. "You should leave this buried." Elias lowered the rifle slightly. "You following me now?" Wasn't hard. "What happened here?" Vance stayed quiet. "That ain't chains for prayer meetings. People moved on." "From what?" Vance stepped closer to the well but never looked directly at Elias. His eyes stayed fixed on the iron cover. "Things folks survived." "That ain't an answer." The sheriff rubbed his jaw slowly. "Bell built the reform house after the war, said he was helping girls nobody wanted, and some never came back." Silence settled between them. Elias looked toward the nameless graves again. "These theirs?" Vance didn't answer. "You knew. Everybody knew something. But nobody stopped it." Vance finally looked at him sharply. "You think men around here had power over Bell? You carried a badge. So did you." That hit harder than Elias expected. Outside, something screamed. Not an animal, the girl. Elias rushed from the chapel instantly, with Vance behind him. The girl stood deep among the trees, clawing violently at her own arms while staring into the woods. Her face had gone pale with terror. "Hey!" Elias grabbed her shoulders. "Look at me!" She screamed again, no words, just raw panic. Then she shoved him backward hard enough to nearly knock him down. "She seeing something?" Vance asked quietly. "I don't know." The girl pointed wildly through the fog between the trees. "There's nothing there," Elias said. But she kept screaming. Mara had grabbed hold of her completely. Suddenly she dropped to her knees and began digging into the dirt with bare hands. Fast, desperate. Mud packed beneath her fingernails while tears rolled down her face. "What's she doing?" Elias muttered. Vance looked sick suddenly. Truly sick. She remembers. The girl stopped digging instantly. Slowly she lifted one shaking hand toward the chapel behind them, toward the bell hanging high above the broken roofline. The bell moved once, soft then again. Elias looked upward sharply. No wind touched the trees. The bell kept swaying. Slow, heavy Vance stepped backward. "No." The girl covered her ears and screamed louder. Then the bell rang. One deep sound rolled through the woods. Elias felt it inside his chest. The girl collapsed hard against the dirt, shaking violently. Another bell strike echoed, then another. Vance whispered something Elias barely heard. What? The sheriff swallowed hard. They used to ring it before punishment. Elias stared at him. Punishment for what? Talking back, running away, existing. The girl suddenly grabbed Elias's coat tightly with both hands. Her eyes locked onto the chapel. Then she made a motion across her throat. A cutting motion. Vance turned pale. She saw it, he whispered. Saw what? But Vance already knew. The sheriff walked slowly toward the chapel entrance again, while the bell continued swinging overhead. Elias stayed beside the girl, trying to steady her breathing. Look at me, he said softly. Her eyes remained fixed on the chapel. Nobody's hurting you now. That seemed almost impossible the moment he said it, because the woods no longer felt empty. They felt crowded, heavy, like grief had stayed buried there too long. Then the girl suddenly spoke, not clearly, barely even a whisper, but Elias heard it. Down there. He looked toward the sealed well beneath the chapel floor. And for the first time since finding her caught inside the trap, real fear settled deep into his bones. Vance emerged slowly from the chapel, carrying something wrapped in dirty cloth. His face looked older suddenly, tired in a way Elias had never seen before. What is that? The sheriff unwrapped the bundle carefully. Inside rested a tiny child's dress stained dark around the collar. The girl made a broken sound in her throat and turned away instantly. Vance stared toward the hanging shoes around the trees. Bell told folks these girls were sick, dangerous, said the mountain-cured weakness. Elias looked at the graves again. This ain't curing. No, then why bury it? Vance's eyes drifted toward the well. Because dead girls don't testify. The bell rang once more above them, soft this time. Almost distant, but none of them looked up again. The bell is still swaying when morning comes. It hangs crooked near the door, moving slow, tapping faint against the wood with each shift of cold air. Elias watches it from the table, eyes tired, rifle within reach. The girl sits on the floor beside him, close enough that her shoulder brushes his boot. You gonna keep staring at that thing? He asks. She doesn't look at him. It ain't ringing anymore. Her fingers tighten against the floor. It's done, he says. She shakes her head once, small and sharp. Elias exhales. Yeah, feels like it ain't. The bell taps again, soft, hollow. She flinches. All right, he mutters. We take it down later. She grabs his sleeve. Not now, he says. Her grip doesn't loosen. I said not now. Her eyes lift, wide and fixed. Fine, he snaps. Later means later. She lets go, but she doesn't move away. Days pass like that. Quiet, tight, close. She follows him everywhere. To the well, to the tree line, back inside, never more than a step behind. Give me space, he says one morning, lifting a water bucket. She doesn't. You're gonna trip me. She doesn't. Kid. Nothing. He stops walking. She nearly runs into him. You hear me? She nods. Then listen. She doesn't move. He sighs. Stay close, just not that close. A small nod. It's the closest thing to agreement he gets. She learns fast. Faster than he expects, he shows her how to haul water. She carries half a bucket without spilling. Not bad, he says. She shrugs. He hands her a knife, points to the rabbit hanging outside. Skin it. She stares. You've done worse. Her face goes blank. Just do it. She steps forward, hands steady. The blade moves clean. No hesitation, no mess. Elias watches. Yeah, he murmurs. You've done worse. Inside, he lays the rifle on the table. Clean it. She looks at him. You know how? Then a slow nod. Go on. She takes it apart piece by piece, careful, exact. Her fingers don't shake, he asks. No answer. You ever get to? Silence. Figures. She finishes, sets it back together, slides it toward him. Good, he says. She sits across from him, watching. Always watching that evening, he smells something wrong, burning paper. He turns from the stove, frowning. What are you doing? She kneels beside the fire, feeding it pages torn from an old Bible. Hey, he snaps, stepping closer. What are you doing? She holds up a page before dropping it into the flames. He grabs another from her hand. Reads obedience, submission, silence. He looks at her. You picking these on purpose? She points at the words, then at herself, then shakes her head hard. No, he asks. She shakes again. Harder. Not you, he says slowly. Her eyes burn into him. Someone else. A small nod. He tosses the page into the fire. All right. She feeds another in, watches it curl. Burn them all if you want, he says. She doesn't stop. Paper after paper turns to ash. Later, they sit at the table with stew gone cold between them. You hate church? Elias asks. Silence. You hate men? Her eyes lift slowly. He leans back, studying her. Yeah, he says. I would too. She doesn't blink. You got reason, he adds. Her hand tightens around the spoon until her knuckles pale. He nods once. Thought so. That night comes heavy. The fire burns low. The wind presses against the cabin walls. Elias sits awake, listening without knowing what for. Then the sound comes. A sharp intake of breath. He turns. The girl thrashes in her sleep, body twisting, hands clawing at nothing. Hey, he says, moving fast. Hey. Her eyes snap open but don't see him. She bites down on her own arm hard. Hey. Elias grabs her, pulling her away. Stop, stop. She fights him, shaking, teeth still trying to find skin. Hey, look at me. She doesn't. Look at me. Her head jerks side to side. Look at me. She freezes for a second. Just enough. Her eyes lock onto his. Good, he says, breath tight. Stay there. Stay with me. She trembles, then collapses forward, all strength gone at once. No sound comes from her, no crying, just shaking. Then the tears start, silent, heavy. Her body folds in on itself. Elias holds her steady. Easy, he says, easy. She pulls away suddenly, crawling toward the fireplace. Hey, he says, what are you doing? She reaches into the cold ash, scooping a handful. Stop, she brings it to her mouth. Stop, he grabs her wrist, yanking it back. Ash spills across the floor. What the hell are you doing? She fights him weakly, trying again. No, he snaps. No. He holds her hands tight. Who did that to you, he asks. No answer. Her breathing stutters. Who taught you that? Nothing. Her eyes fill again, but she doesn't break. Instead, she grabs his wrist hard. She pulls him closer. Then presses 2 fingers against the pulse in his neck. Elias goes still. What are you doing? Her fingers stay there, feeling, checking. He swallows. I'm here. She doesn't move. I'm alive. Her grip tightens. I ain't going nowhere, he says. A long pause, then she lets go. Slow, careful, like she's not sure it's real. They sit there in silence, ash scattered between them. Outside, a distant glow moves through the trees. Lanterns. Elias stands slowly, stepping to the window. Riders pass below the mountain, shadows stretched long by firelight. He counts them, 1, 2, 3, more behind. They're getting closer. He says the girl doesn't move. They're not stopping. The lights drift through the dark like a slow line of eyes. Elias watches until they disappear, then he turns. She's watching him again, always watching. What? He asks. Nothing. Say it. She can't. He rubs his face. Yeah, right. He crosses to the drawer near the bed. Opens it. Inside, wrapped in cloth, sits the badge, Sheriff, old, dulled, forgotten. He stares at it. You wore that? His own voice seems to ask. Yeah, he answers quietly. You left. I did. You let it rot. I had my reasons. You ran. His jaw tightens. I survived. Silence answers him. He looks back at the girl. She hasn't moved. Doesn't matter now, he mutters. He walks to the fire, holds the badge over the flames, hesitates. You don't get to pretend anymore, he says to himself. The metal glints once, then he lets it fall. It lands in the fire with a dull sound, quickly swallowed by heat. The girl flinches. Good, Elias says, watching it blacken. Let it burn. She steps closer, stares into the flames, at the badge, at the past. At whatever comes next. You stay with me, he says. She nods. You listen when I tell you something. Another nod. You don't hurt yourself again. A pause. Then a slow, uncertain nod. That's enough, he says. The fire cracks. Outside, the mountain shifts in its sleep. Inside, the air feels tighter. Closer, the bond between them isn't trust. It isn't safety. It's something else. Something built from shared damage, from silence. From things neither of them can say. Elias sits beside her again. Neither speaks. The ashes settle, the night deepens. And somewhere below, the hunt keeps moving. The sheriff badge melted slowly inside the stove, while Elias Boone sat beside the fire, sharpening a knife that no longer needed sharpening. The silver bent inward under the heat until the star shape collapsed into itself. The girl watched every second of it. "You happy now?" She nodded once. Ilias leaned back in the chair. "Took me 20 years to earn that thing." The girl stared at the fire. "Maybe longer to deserve losing it." Outside the cabin, snow drifted lightly across the mountain ridge. Silence filled the room except for the crackling stove. Ilias stood finally and grabbed his coat. "I'm riding down." The girl looked up sharply. "To Belle's place." Her face tightened immediately. "You stay here," she stood quickly. "No," the word barely escaped her throat. Thin, damaged, Ilias stared at her. "You can talk." The girl looked almost angry at herself for letting it slip. "You staying hidden anyway." She shook her head hard. "You walk into Belle's house, you die. So you do talk." The girl turned away. Elias stepped closer carefully. "What's he do to girls down there?" Silence again. "You seen the well?" Her breathing sharpened. "You seen worse?" The girl grabbed his coat sleeve suddenly and pointed toward the eastern woods outside. "You hide there," Elias said. "Close enough if something goes wrong." She hesitated. "Not inside the estate." Finally, she let go. By afternoon, Elias rode into the valley alone while the girl disappeared into the tree line behind Belle's property. Smoke drifted from the governor's mansion long before the house came fully into view. The place looked enormous against the hill's white walls, tall windows, iron fences. A church bell mounted above the central roof, too clean, too proper, like violence dressed for Sunday service. Two armed men opened the front gate without speaking. Elias rode through slowly, noticing young women scrubbing stone steps under the eyes of armed deputies. None looked up. Governor Bell greeted him personally at the front doors with a warm smile and open arms. "You still hiding up there, Boone?" "Still breathing." Bell laughed softly. "That mountain keeps old ghosts alive." "Seems this valley does too." Bell guided him inside without reacting. "Drink?" "Sure." The mansion smelled strange beneath the whiskey and polished wood. Something sour lingered underneath. Elias noticed locks on nearly every hallway door. Bell poured 2 glasses. "You hear about the runaway girl?" "Heard stories. She's sick." "So folks say. She kills animals, hurts children." Bell smiled while speaking, but Elias caught movement along the dining room wall nearby. Scratches, deep nail marks cut into the wood paneling beside the staircase. "Human ones." Elias looked back at Bell. "Children do that?" Bell followed his eyes calmly. "Fits. Some girls arrive broken already, and some leave buried." The room went still for one long second. Then Bell smiled again. "Sheriff Vance talks too much. You know about the chapel?" "I built the chapel." "You built the graves too?" Bell handed him the whiskey glass carefully. "You think pain disappears because folks refuse hard choices?" Bell moved closer. "Girls abandoned by families. Girls touched wrong by fathers. Girls born wild." His smile faded slightly. "Places like this clean rot before it spreads." Ilias stared at him quietly. Bell sipped whiskey. "That girl don't speak because the devil took language from her." "And you plan on saving her?" "I already tried." A woman crossed the hallway carrying linens. Bruises marked both her wrists. She kept her eyes lowered the entire time. Bell noticed Elias watching. "Some people need structure." "Chains too." Bell's smile disappeared briefly. "You were sheriff once. Don't pretend force shocks you." "Force ain't the same as cruelty." Bell stepped nearer. "Depends who writes the difference." Dinner passed slowly after that. Bell talked politics, railroads, taxes, church donations. Elias barely listened. He watched the house instead, locked doors. Nervous servants. Young girls never speaking above whispers. The entire mansion felt like fear pretending to be order. Late that evening, Bell excused himself for prayer upstairs. Ilias waited exactly 3 minutes before moving. He slipped through the back hallway quietly, until he found the chapel doors near the rear wing of the estate. Candles flickered inside beneath painted saints watching from the walls. Then Elias noticed the staircase descending beneath the altar. Stone steps, basement. The air below smelled damp and old. He descended slowly with one hand near the revolver. Iron doors lined both sides of the underground hallway, some small enough for children, others fitted with narrow viewing slots. Elias opened one carefully. Iron bed. Leather straps, bucket. Nothing else. The next room held the same. And the next, farther down the corridor, stood shelves stacked with ledgers and records. Elias grabbed one quickly and opened it beneath the lantern light. Not names. Numbers girls listed like livestock. Subject 3, Subject 8, Subject 11. Beside each entry sat notes written in neat handwriting. Disobedient, violent, unclean. Elias flipped pages faster. Then he found her subject 14 female, approximately 19. Resists cleansing, displays animal attachment, refuses prayer, voice withheld intentionally. Elias felt cold all over. A floorboard creaked softly behind him. He turned instantly. The girl stood in the doorway holding a knife against a young boy's throat, Belle's son. Maybe 12 years old, terrified. The girl's eyes looked completely different now, empty and furious at once. "What are you doing?" Elias whispered. The boy whimpered softly. The knife pressed harder. Footsteps thundered above them suddenly. Belle's voice downstairs. "Boone?" The girl never looked away from the child. Then she spoke. The words came rough and broken, like they hurt coming out. "Make him hurt." Elias froze. Belle reached the bottom of the stairs and stopped dead at the sight. For the first time since Elias entered the estate, the governor looked genuinely afraid. "Easy now," Belle whispered. The girl trembled violently. He watched. Belle's son started crying harder. "Father." "Hush," Belle snapped. Elias stepped carefully between them. "Put the knife down." The girl shook her head. "She made me watch," she whispered. Belle's face drained pale. Elias looked at him sharply. "Watch what?" "Nothing," Belle answered too quickly. The girl screamed suddenly. Raw, animal. Years of silence tearing open inside her chest. She burned them. Belle lunged forward. Elias grabbed him hard and slammed him against the wall. "Don't!" The boy slipped free crying while the girl backed deeper into the hallway with the knife shaking in her hand. "She remembers," Belle whispered. Elias turned toward him slowly. "Remembers what?" Belle stared toward the girl with hatred so deep it barely looked human anymore. She was supposed to forget. The girl pointed the knife directly at Belle. Tears rolled down her face while rage twisted every word coming from her mouth. "You buried them." Heavy footsteps thundered above the chapel ceiling. More men arriving, deputies. Belle smiled suddenly despite the fear still clinging to him. "You came into my house alone, Boone." Elias heard rifles cocking upstairs. The girl heard it too, but instead of panicking, she smiled for the first time since Elias found her caught inside the trap. Not relief, reckoning, like violence, finally sounded familiar again. Then all the lanterns inside the basement blew out at once. And somebody screamed in the darkness below the chapel stairs, while the girl disappeared silently into the black hallway behind them, completely. The knife presses tight against the boy's throat, just enough to break skin. A thin line of red forms trembling with each breath he takes. The room smells like damp wood and old iron. No one moves. "Easy now," Belle whispers. The girl's hand shakes so hard the blade rattles against bone. "Don't," Elias says, stepping forward. "You don't gotta do this." Belle raises a hand slightly. "Careful," he murmurs. "You'll scare her. She ain't scared." Elias says, "She's done being scared." The boy lets out a small cry. "Pa, quiet." Belle snaps, not taking his eyes off the girl. "It's all right. He's all right." The girl breathes fast, broken, uneven. "You remember me?" Belle asks her softly, her grip tightens. "I remember you," he continues. "You were always quiet, always good." Elias takes another step. "Put the knife down." "She made me watch," the girl says. The words land wrong, heavy, not loud, but they stop everything. Belle's smile fades just a little. "Watch what?" Elias asks. The boy starts crying harder. "Pa, make her stop." "Be still," Belle says. She burned their names, the girl says. Elias looks at Belle. Belle exhales slowly. She's confused. No, the girl says. You made us watch. That's enough. Belle snaps, voice cracking sharper now. You lined them up, she continues. Louder. You said God would clean them. Stop, Belle says. You said we were dirt. I said stop. You burned them, she says. Belle lunges. It happens fast. Too fast, the girl jerks the knife across the boy's face. A shallow cut. Blood spills down his cheek as he screams. Elias moves at the same time, slamming into her, driving her backward to the ground. Stop, he shouts. The knife skids across the floor. She fights him hard. Wild, clawing, kicking. Let me go, she screams. Hey, Elias pins her arms. Hey, look at me. She doesn't. Look at me. Her voice breaks open then, loud. My name is Ruth. The sound fills the basement. It doesn't echo clean. It hits the walls and comes back wrong, like something else is saying it too. Ruth. She gasps, chest heaving. My name is Ruth. Elias freezes for half a second, then softer. Ruth. She collapses under him, strength gone. Her body folds inward, shaking hard. Ruth sobs. Not quiet, not controlled. It comes from deep inside her like it's been waiting years. Elias lets go slowly, sitting back. All right, he says. All right. Across the room, Belle stares, not angry, not shocked. Afraid, like something buried just clawed its way out of the ground. You should stayed quiet, Belle says. Ruth looks up, eyes wet and burning. You took my name. Belle shakes his head slowly. I gave you purpose. You burned them, she says again. They were sick, he snaps. They were girls, they were sinners, they were children. Silence hits hard. The boy whimpers, clutching his bleeding face. Pa! Belle doesn't move toward him, footsteps thunder above. Voices, oars slamming open. Elias stands, grabbing the knife, kicking it away from Ruth. We ain't alone anymore. Belle straightens his coat, trying to pull himself back together. Good, he says. About time. The basement door bursts open. Sheriff Vance steps in, gun drawn, deputies behind him. Drop it, one deputy shouts. Elias raises his hands. Easy. Ruth doesn't move. Belle gestures toward her. There, that's the one. She attacked my son. Is that so? Vance asks. The boy cries. She cut me. Belle points. You see? Dangerous. I told you these girls? Shut up. Vance says. Belle blinks. What? I said shut up. The room shifts. Elias watches Vance carefully. You're late. Had to be sure, Vance replies. Sure of what? Vance looks at Belle. Long. Cold. That enough people were ready. Belle laughs once. Short. Forced. Ready for what? For this, Vance says. He steps forward and grabs Belle by the arm, wrenching it behind his back. Belle stumbles. What are you doing? Arresting you. Belle stares. I do now. On whose orders? Mine. You answer to me. Not anymore. The deputies move in, grabbing Belle's other arm. This is a mistake, Belle snaps. You think you understand what I've built here? I understand enough, Vance says. You already did. Belle struggles. Let go of me. No. I said let go. No. Elias watches. Slow realization settling in. About time, he mutters. Ruth sits on the floor, silent now, staring. Above them, more footsteps. Softer this time, careful, the women start coming down, one by one, faces Elias recognizes. Some he doesn't. They carry papers, ledgers, boxes. The preacher's daughter steps forward first. You wrote everything down, she says to Belle. Belle stiffens. You don't know what you're holding. I do, she says. Names, dates, punishments. Another woman steps beside her. My sister was here, another voice. Mine too. They never came home. You said they ran. You lied. The words come faster now, sharp, stacking over each other. You locked them in rooms. You starved them. You burned them. Belle shakes his head. Lies you made us watch, the preacher's daughter says. You told us it was God. You said silence was holy. You said pain was cleansing. Belle's voice cracks. It was necessary. For what? Vance asks. For order. You buried girls in God's house, Vance says. The room goes still again. Belle looks around, desperate now. You think they'll thank you for tearing this down? No, Vance says. But they might sleep. Belle laughs again, louder this time. You're all fools. Maybe? Elias says. But we're done being quiet. Ruth stands slowly. Every eye turns to her. She sways a Ruth, she says again. This time it's not a scream, it's flat. Certain the women nod. Some cry. Some just stare. Belle's face tightens. You don't exist. I do. You were nothing. I remember everything. You were broken. You broke us. Vance pulls Belle toward the stairs. We're finished here. No, Belle says, digging his heels in. This isn't over. It is tonight. As they drag him up, Belle keeps shouting. You need me. You'll come back. You always do. His voice fades as he's pulled out of the basement. The boy is taken after him, still crying. Silence settles. Not empty. Fool. Elias looks at Ruth. You all right? She doesn't answer. Her head turns slowly toward the far wall toward the dark beyond it. You hear that? She asks. Elias frowns. Hear what? The women go quiet. They listen. Nothing at first, then faint, very faint. A sound, children's voices, soft singing, not above, below, from somewhere under the ground. Ruth's face goes still. They're still here. One of the women shakes her head. No. Yes, Ruth says. The sound lingers, thin, fragile. Wrong. Elias steps closer to the wall. There's nothing there. Ruth backs away. You don't hear them, I hear wind. It's not wind. The singing rises just enough to make the air feel tight, a low, broken melody, like something trapped. Make it stop, one woman whispers. No one moves. Ruth presses her hands to her ears. They won't stop. Elias grabs her shoulders. Ruth, look at me. Her eyes snap to his. They ain't real, he says. They are. They're gone. They're not. The singing dips, then rises again. Closer, Ruth's voice shakes. They're calling. Calling who? Her lips part slowly. Me. Elias grips her tighter. No. She doesn't pull away, she just listens. And somewhere beneath the house, the children keep singing. The singing continued faintly beneath the chapel floors, while everyone stood frozen inside Belle's basement. Ruth still gripped the knife tightly in her trembling hand. Belle stared at her with naked hatred now. No smile left. No preacher's mask, only fear and fury. Then gunfire erupted outside. The first shots shattered the upstairs windows. Men started screaming across the estate grounds. Horses panicked near the front gates. Belle turned sharply toward the staircase. What did you do? Nobody answered him. Another rifle blast thundered overhead. Smoke drifted down through the chapel floorboards almost immediately. Belle's loyalists were torching the estate. Cows spread fast. Women ran through the hallways upstairs, crying and coughing, while deputies fired from the front porch. Glass shattered. Bells rang somewhere outside. Elias grabbed Ruth's arm hard. We gotta move. She pulled away instantly. The cells, the place is burning. They're still down there. Nobody's alive down here. Ruth stared at him like he had insulted the dead directly. Then she ran deeper into the basement corridors. Damn it, Elias muttered. He chased her through thickening smoke while footsteps pounded overhead. Somewhere nearby, Sheriff Vance shouted orders across the courtyard. Protect the records. Flames spread quickly through the chapel ceiling. Burning wood cracked loudly above them. Ruth reached the locked hallway at the far end of the underground chambers and slammed her shoulder against one iron door. It did not move. Elias caught up, breathing hard. Stop! She grabbed a rusted shovel nearby and smashed it against the lock again. Ruth. Another hit. The lock cracked. You can't save ghosts. They're still here. The dead are dead. No! She tore the door open hard enough to rip one hinge loose. Inside sat shelves, dozens of shelves, not bodies, belongings. Tiny dresses folded carefully into stacks. Hair ribbons tied with names written inside. Children's shoes, letters bundled with string, locks of hair stored inside glass jars, and teeth. Small children's teeth preserved in metal tins. Elias went cold. Ruth stepped into the room slowly like she already knew it existed. They kept them, she whispered. Smoke rolled heavily through the doorway around them. Flames spread farther overhead. Ruth picked up one tiny dress with shaking hands. She wore this. Elias watched her carefully. Who, my sister? The words barely escaped her. Ruth pressed the dress against her face and broke completely. Not loud at first, just shaking. Then the sobs hit all at once, violent, years buried alive inside her chest finally coming loose. Leah's grabbed her shoulders carefully. "Look at me. They took everything." "I know. You don't. And he didn't. Not fully. He knew grief. He knew death. But this felt older than either. This was people erased while still breathing." Ruth shoved past him deeper into the room, searching frantically through boxes and shelves. "What are you looking for?" She wrote letters. "Who?" "My mother." Another explosion rocked the chapel overhead. Burning beams crashed somewhere nearby. "We gotta go now." Ruth ignored him completely. She ripped open another crate filled with photographs and prayer books. Then she froze. A small leather notebook rested beneath the pile. Ruth opened it carefully. Her whole face changed. Elias stepped closer. "What is it?" She kept names. "Whose names?" "All of them." Gunshots cracked outside again. Closer now, Elias grabbed the notebook from her carefully and stuffed it inside his coat. "Move." Ruth looked around the room one last time. "They treated us like animals." Smoke swallowed the doorway almost entirely. Elias dragged her into the hallway just as flames burst through the ceiling behind them. Heat slammed into both of them instantly. They ran. The basement shook violently, while burning wood collapsed above their heads. Elias pushed Ruth toward the chapel stairs. "Hurry!" Halfway up the staircase, they nearly collided with Deputy Harrow, rushing downward holding a rifle. "There they are!" Harrow raised the weapon instantly. Ruth moved faster. The knife buried deep into his shoulder before he could fire. Harrow screamed and tumbled backward into the smoke. Elias grabbed Ruth again. "Keep moving!" Outside the estate grounds had become a war zone. Bell's men fired wildly from horseback while deputies returned fire from behind wagons and stone fences. Flames climbed the mansion walls fast now. Women fled through smoke, carrying children and boxes of records against their chests. Sheriff Vance stood near the chapel entrance, reloading calmly, beside two fallen bodies. "Bell's running!" he shouted. Elias turned. Governor Bell rode hard toward the eastern trail on horseback with two armed men beside him. Firelight flashed across his face while smoke rolled behind him. Vance lifted the rifle. Bell saw him too late. The shot echoed across the valley. Bell jerked violently backward in the saddle before crashing hard into the dirt near the chapel well. His horse bolted riderless through the smoke. Everything slowed suddenly. The governor tried crawling weakly through the mud while blood spread beneath his chest. Vance approached carefully with the rifle still raised. Bell coughed hard. "You'll bury this too." "No," Vance answered quietly. Bell looked toward Ruth, standing beside Elias near the burning chapel steps. Hatred filled his face, even dying. She was born wrong. Ruth stepped forward slowly. "No." Bell tried speaking again, but blood flooded his mouth before the words fully formed. Then he stopped moving, right beside the same ground where the missing girls had been buried for years. The fire climbed higher along the ridge behind them, while ashes drifted through the valley like falling snow. Deputies dragged surviving girls away from the burning estate. Some cried, some stared blankly, some looked relieved and terrified at once. Ruth walked slowly toward the chapel, well carrying a lantern taken from the basement. Elias watched carefully. For one terrible second he thought she meant to jump. "Ruth!" She kept walking. "Ruth!" The well sat black and open beside Bell's body. Smoke curled from the chapel roof above it. Ruth stopped at the edge, staring downward into the darkness beneath the earth. Elias approached slowly behind her. "It's over." "No." She looked down into the well. "They're still there." The lantern shook slightly in her hand. Elias saw tears running silently down her face again. "You don't gotta carry them alone anymore." Ruth finally looked at him. "Somebody has to remember." Then she dropped the lantern into the well. The flame vanished deep below for one long second. Then fire exploded upward beneath the earth. A deep roar rolled through the ground under their feet. Flames burst from cracks around the chapel foundation while smoke poured violently from beneath the buried graves. The underground chambers ignited all at once. People screamed and backed away from the heat. Ruth never moved. She stood staring into the burning well while orange light flickered across her face. Not smiling. Not crying, just watching like she needed to see the darkness burn with her own eyes before believing it could end at all. Behind them, the governor's mansion collapsed inward with a roar of sparks and fire that lit the entire valley red, until even the mountain trees looked like they were bleeding in the night beside. Fire glows beneath the well. It does not crackle. It breathes, low and steady, a dull orange pulse rising through the dark shaft like something alive below the ground. Smoke rolls up slow, curling over the stones. Spreading across the yard, nobody speaks. Elias stands with his hands at his sides, staring down into it. Ruth stands a few feet back, arms wrapped tight around herself, eyes fixed on the same place. "You see it?" Elias asks. Ruth nods once. "It wasn't there before." Another nod. He shifts his weight. "Something's still burning." She swallows. Something stayed. They both look down again. The smoke keeps coming. Days pass before anyone touches the ground. Men arrive first, then women, then families who had left years ago and now return with quiet faces and empty hands. They dig, slow at first, then faster, shovels strike wood. Then cloth, then bone. Nobody shouts, nobody runs. They kneel, they uncover, they take back what was hidden. Elias watches from the edge of the field as a woman lifts a small bundle wrapped in rotted fabric. Her hands shake, but she doesn't cry. "That's her," she whispers. A man beside her nods. "That's her." "How do you know?" "I know." Another voice nearby. "I found his boot." Another. "There's two here." Another. "No, three." Names start returning, not all at once. One by one, spoken low, carried across the dirt. Ruth stands among them, watching each face as if she is counting them. "You remember them?" Elias asks quietly. She nods. "All of them?" A pause. Then another nod. "They remember you now," he says. Her eyes shift slightly, but she says nothing. The preacher stands in front of the chapel 2 days later. The building still smells like smoke. One wall is blackened, the cross above the door cracked down the center. People gather, not many, enough the preacher's hands shake as he holds his hat. "I didn't know," he says. No one answers. "I swear it. I didn't know what was happening below." A woman steps to obey. "I told you what I believed. You told us silence was faith." His voice cracks. "I was wrong." Another voice. "You were blind." "I see now. That don't fix anything." He nods slowly. "No, it doesn't." He sets the hat down on the chapel steps. "I'm stepping down," he says. "I won't lead anymore." "Good," someone mutters. He doesn't argue. He just walks away. Sheriff Vance stands outside the same chapel later that afternoon. The badge rests in his palm, dull in the weak light. Elias approaches from the road. "You done?" Vance glances at him. "Yeah." "You staying?" Vance shakes his head. "No. Town needs a sheriff. Town needs a lot of things. You could help fix it." Vance looks back at the chapel. Town built itself on silence. "So did most places," Elias says. "Maybe," Vance replies. "Don't mean I'm staying to watch it happen again." He steps forward and hangs the badge on a nail beside the door. It sways slightly, not unlike the bell once did. "You running?" Elias asks. Vance looks at him. "You did." Elias doesn't answer. Vance nods once, then walks down the road without looking back. Ruth speaks less now. When she does, it comes slow, measured like each word costs her something. That evening, she sits outside the cabin with a knife in her hand, dragging it steady along a whetstone. The sound is soft. Repeating Elias leans against the doorframe, watching her. "You still afraid of me?" she asks without looking up. "Yes," he says. She pauses slightly. "That good or bad means you're real." She considers that the corner of her mouth lifts just a little, almost a smile. Then it's gone. "You should be afraid," she says. "I am." "Good," he nods. "You? Of you?" "Yeah." She resumes, sharpening. "No, why not?" "You didn't lie." He looks away. "Not this time." She glances at him. "You did before." He doesn't deny it. The blade scrapes again. Slow, careful. "Tell me something," he says. She doesn't answer. "Why you stayed quiet that long?" The sound stops. She holds the knife still. They thought I was broken, she says. You weren't. I let them think that. Why? She looks at him then, straight on. Because broken things don't get watched as close. Elias nods slowly. You hid. I survived. He steps closer. What happened to your mother? The question hangs there, heavy. Ruth looks past him toward the valley. She talked, Ruth says. About Belle? Yes. What did she say that he was killing girls? Elias exhales. And no one listened. What did Belle do? Ruth's grip tightens on the knife. He took her. Elias waits, she screamed, Ruth says. I heard it from the hallway. His jaw tightens. She nods once. He told me to watch. Elias closes his eyes briefly. He said it was a lesson, Ruth continues. Said silence keeps you alive. And you listened. I learned. They stand in it, the quiet between them. What now? Elias asks. Ruth looks out over the valley again. The burned chapel sits in the distance, black, empty, still standing. Now they remember us, she says. Elias follows her gaze. That enough? What is? She doesn't answer. Morning comes cold and pale. The ground is softer now where the graves have been marked. Fresh wood stands at the head of each one. Rough cuts, uneven edges. Ruth kneels in front of one, carving into the wood with slow, careful strokes, a name. She presses hard, making each letter deep. Elias stands a few feet behind her, arms crossed, watching. You got them all? He asks. She doesn't look up. Most. What about the ones you don't remember? She pauses. I remember enough, he nods. Good. She finishes one name, brushes the wood clean with her hand, then moves to the next. The sun starts to rise behind the hills, light stretching slowly across the valley. You tired? Elias asks. No, you should rest. No, he lets it go. She carves another name, and another. Each one pulled from somewhere deep. Each one returned. Elias shifts his weight. You staying? She doesn't answer right away. The knife keeps moving. I don't know, she says finally. You got a place here, for now. That's enough. She stops carving for a moment. Looks at the row of markers. They were here, she says. Yeah, they mattered. They do now. She nods once, then goes back to carving. Elias watches her work. The mountain behind them is quiet. Not empty, not clean, but quiet. The smoke from the well is gone. The ground holds what it holds, no more, no less. Ruth finishes the last name and sets the knife down. She rests her hand against the wood for a moment, eyes closed. Then she stands. Elias steps beside her. Neither speaks. Below them, the valley stretches out, changed, not fixed, but seen. And for the first time, neither of them looks away.